We live in a beautiful world. Look around you. It's amazing. You can see different sceneries, mountains, forests, grasslands, deserts, tall buildings, and the human existence. If you look at your surroundings, it's a masterpiece. It's like a painting with millions of different colors, with the most complex structures and shapes. We will now look into the landscapes that make up our beautiful world. A landscape is a portion of land which the eye can comprehend in a single view or spatial context, including all the objects it contains. Consider the view of Baguio City. It is a patchwork of forests, fields, parks, pine plantations, and human habitations. This patchwork of different types of land cover is called a mosaic. In arts, a mosaic is a picture or pattern produced by putting together small colored pieces of hard material such as stone, tile, or glass. Mosaics can be eye-catching and are pleasing to the eyes. Since ancient times, mosaics have mesmerized with their dazzling colors and distinctive aesthetic. Often made of meticulously arranged colored glass tiles, mosaics can offer an eye-catching approach to art and decoration. The landscape mosaic is a product of the boundaries defined by changes in the physical and biological structure of the distinct communities called patches. Patches are relative homogeneous community types such as crop fields, forest pond, or lawns which differ from their surroundings both in structure and in species composition. They result from interaction of factors including geology, topography, soils, and climate. The communities that surround the patch constitute its matrix. Natural variations in geology and soil conditions and natural events such as fire and grazing by herbivores all interact to govern the formation of patches. But human activity is the most obvious force in determining the size and shape of landscape patches.
Among the landscape's most conspicuous features are the edges or borders that mark the perimeter of each patch. An example is a large rock outcrop in a forest. The place where the edge of one patch meets the edge of another is called a border. Some borders between landscape patches are narrow and abrupt, while others are wide. Borders also vary in length and may be straight, convoluted, or perforated. Functionally, borders connect patches through fluxes or flows or material, energy, and organisms. They can differentially restrict or facilitate the dispersal of seed and the movements of animals across the landscape. Because borders blend elements from all adjacent patches, they offer unique habitats with relatively easy access to the adjacent communities. Narrow, abrupt borders appear to be attractive to predators. Raccoons, opossums, and foxes may use edges as travel lanes. Avian predators such as crows and jays rob nests, inhabiting more open edge habitat. Environmental conditions imposed by the physical environment in transition zones between patches enable certain plant and animal species to colonize border environments. Plant species found in such areas tend to be more shade intolerant and can tolerate dry conditions caused by higher air temperatures and rates of evapotranspiration. Animal species inhabiting border environments are usually those that require two or more habitat types within their territory. For example, the ruffed grouse requires new forest openings with an abundance of herbaceous plants and low shrubs, a dense stand of sapling trees, and mature forests for winter food and cover. Other species, such as the indigo bunting, are restricted to the edge environment. They are often called as edge species.
The influence of patch size to the species richness led to the theory of island biogeography by Robert MacArthur and Edward O. Wilson, which emphasizes the importance of migration, movement of species among patches on the landscape, and in regulating the structure and dynamics of communities. Landscape connectivity is the degree to which the landscape facilitates the movement of organisms among patches. There are two components, which are the structural connectivity that relates to the physical arrangement of patches, wherein the degree to which patches are contiguous to one another. Functional connectivity, on the other hand, describes the degree to which the landscape facilitates the movement of organisms and is both landscape and species-specific. Corridors are one of the structural features of the landscape that can facilitate the ability of organisms to move patches of suitable habitat. They are strips of vegetation similar to the patches they connect, but different from the surrounding matrix in which they are set. Examples of corridors include hedgerow and riverine vegetation. Corridors can encourage gene flow and also act as filters. Different sized gaps in corridors allow certain organisms to cross while restricting others. This phenomenon is also known as the filter effect. We will now go to the central concepts in the study of landscape dynamics, which are the metapopulation and the metacommunity. The concept of metapopulation provides a framework for examining the dynamics of species that are distributed as discrete populations on the larger landscape. The model of metapopulation dynamics views the equilibrium number of patches occupied by a given species as the balance between colonization and extinction of local populations. Each habitat patch on the landscape is composed of a set of plant and animal species that define the local community. The set of local communities that are linked by the dispersal of multiple potentially interacting species define the metacommunity. The model of metacommunity dynamics examines patterns and processes relating to the connections among local communities. The distinct patterns of communities that we see in the landscape, as well as the plant and animal species inhabiting them, are heavily influenced by disturbances both past and present. There are many kinds of disturbances that disrupts community structure and functions, such as fire, windstorm, flood, extremely cold temperatures, drought, or epidemics. Disturbances both create and are influenced by patterns on the landscape. For example, communities on ridgetops are more susceptible to damage from wind and ice storms, while bottomland communities along streams and rivers are more susceptible to flooding.
Provident Village residents in Marikina City are living a nightmare. 2 days after Tropical Storm Ondoy flooded the area, a number of residents were still trapped inside their houses.
Many disturbances arise from natural causes such as wind and ice storms, lightning fires, hurricanes, floods, grazing animals, and insect outbreaks. Disturbances can also be a powerful force for changing the physical environment. Storm floods cut away banks, change the course of streams and rivers, scour stream bottoms, redeposit sediments, and carry away aquatic organisms. High winds and tide break down barrier dunes and allow seawater to invade the shoreline, which in turn changes the geomorphology of barrier islands. Wind and moving water are two powerful agents of disturbance. There are many hurricanes that struck the Philippines that destroyed land masses.
Bandang alas 4 ng madaling araw, naglandfall ang bagyong Yolanda sa Giwan, Eastern Samar. Pero hanggang Tacloban City, ramdam na ang hagupit ng malakas na hanging dala ng bagyo.
Fire is also a major agent of disturbance which alters both physical and biological environments. Some of the most lasting disturbances to the landscape are human-induced. Because human activity is ongoing and involves continuous management of an ecosystem, it affects ecosystems more profoundly than natural disturbances. Another large-scale disturbance is timber harvesting. Disturbance to the forests depends on the logging methods employed. It can also change the species composition and diversity because it favors shade-intolerant species of trees. Clear cutting involves removal of wide blocks of trees, favoring reproduction of shade-intolerant species of trees. Unlike the artist's mosaic that has survived unchanged for centuries, the mosaic of communities defining the landscape is ever-changing. Patterns of land use will shift boundaries, succession will alter the structure of communities, and natural disturbances such as fire and storms will form new dynamic patches within the mosaic.